Hi there. This is Mondian Astral Oracles out here in the Danish spring. It looks like it's finally arrived. Um, there's a famous painting by uh, Nicolas Poisson, a French classicist painter from the 1600s, and it's called In Arcadio Ego. It depicts these three shepherds in an idyllic archaic landscape looking at what's presumably a tombstone with this inscription, and in that sparse Latin way it means and in Arcadia which means also in paradise I am. It's the words of death that's spoken into this vision of idyllic paradise, and it's of course pointing to, well, this timeless awareness of human beings that somehow joy, pleasure, life is accompanied by all these emotions of grief and sorrow. And in my own experience, like I've been feeling that partially there's the sense that the sorrow is very much something that's coming from the past, and that's wanting to be released through recognition, but that it's actually that there's a lot of promise towards something else. But at the same time, I feel I was out walking my mother's dog Martha the other day, and was struck by this sadness that she's getting old. She's 10 years old, and of course, well, you can see like if in the foreseeable future, of course, you will have to say goodbye to her, and she's not in as good health as usually. And then I had some friends of a friend, and my friend told me that they had just lost a child in labor. So there are just tragedies built into to existing. But at the same time, English has this wonderful distinction between sorrow and grief. So so it seems like there are stages to it, because both emotions have a signature of truth, like they seem authentic, unless some of the unlike some of the lower emanations of unpleasant emotion. Um, so feelings like hatred, bitterness, resentment, um, envy, all these things are like lower emanations of unpleasantness. And then you get up into, let us say, the higher emotions of unpleasantness, where sorrow and grief are definitely sitting, because there's also a type of relishing of well, the passing of forms, and the joy of attachment, and the futility of life, and therefore also the necessity to reach out and touch it and taste it and treasure it. So in that way, they're also very beautiful. And then grief sort of implies also an integration, a sort of coming to terms with these emotions, with this fundamental experience of being a being, and thereby also being attached to other things that must pass, because we're down here in the sublunar realms of the temporal and the fleeting. And so I'll bring in the Arcturians, because the Arcturians also have like this very melancholic vibration, and it's something you often experience in those people we could term Arcturian starseeds. That there is this underlying vibration of, we could almost call it languor, like beautiful, almost aesthetic melancholia, that somehow also treasures the beauty of passing things. So let's hear what our man Umblam has to say about this, and thank you for being here, guys. Hope you enjoy. Yes, hello, dear Earthlings. I come to you commenting on sorrow and grief, but it is not a somber message that I bring you. Instead, it is another message of joy and hope. We know the channel is saying right now that, well, he puts a positive spin on everything, but perhaps it's a kind of silly to also put it on things like death and loss and grief, bereavement, the sense that you have been robbed of something important that was dear to you. Well, these are emotions that shouldn't be made fun of to the human psyche. Well, maybe they shouldn't be made fun of, but they can be made light of. That is, these are all melodies playing in a symphony, and it's the arrangement of the tones in the outer tonal range which gives this symphony its fullness. If you were to approach it visually, you could say that one of the things that is most pleasing to the human eye, and indeed to all light-sensitive beings, is the refraction and the reflection of light as it encounters water and becomes prismatic in its apprehension. So the rainbow is beautiful to you, the prism is beautiful to you, it is beautiful to you to see submerged in the water the waves of the sun passing through and being turned into wavy softness down there in the aquatic realms. And so notice that why would then Source not have provided for tears that could refract the light of your eye? And why would they not make sure that these beautiful prisms of salt water that cleanse and purify and that make way for the new, that they would be so close in your organism that you could not avoid them? The divine treasures sorrow because it is a testament to the love with which the world was built. See, if the world hadn't been constructed or built in these contrasts, these separations of emotions, these experiences of both attachment, joy, excitement, ecstasy, and the experience of loss, pain, sorrow, and grief, well, it would have been impossible to believe the mirage. That is to say, it would be impossible for the divine to perceive itself as all these shapes if it hadn't created the shapes so wonderfully enchanting, so compelling that it would lose itself in its attachments to them. And so, in that sense, the system that you call Buddhism, it is true in its fundamental apprehension of attachment being the source of all pain. But in the same time, it also understands that this attachment is exactly what makes the divine game go. It's the fuel of the operation, so to speak. It's the idea of divine love, the love of creation, manifested in attachment to something. And so, seen from the perspective of Source, or indeed seen from the perspective of these higher dimensions, the ninth dimension from which I and we communicate to you, the ninth dimension or Arcturian Council, seen from this perspective, well, the sorrow is a part of the experience. Seen from our perspective, the hangover is a part of the drunkenness. It's not a side effect. It's both things that your higher self wishes to manifest. And it does so to unify your being. Much of your being is split into what is preferred and what is not preferred. And you then often identify the preferred with the pleasurable, and what is not preferred with the painful. It is, of course, both a biological and an emotional instinct that is sound, but it does not comprehend these glimpses of the higher dimensional perception, or what you may think of as the light of the divine that resides within you, and that's choosing to have deeper engagements with reality. And with deeper engagements with reality, it means that you also transpose yourself and your being into these other beings that surround you. You transpose yourself into other beings. These might even be beings that haven't been born yet but are set to arrive, or it might be beloved pets surrounding you. It might be plants that you are fond of. It might be the beehive in your backyard, or it might be simply an object that you have attached a lot of intention and meaning to. All these things are ways in which you create a reality and you make this reality sustainable. And so there would have been no joy in creating this reality if there wasn't the very serious stake at play of actually arriving at painful sorrow. And there would also be no joy in having this if it wasn't a emotion that was surmountable by its integration. Meaning, if you integrate emotion into your being, if you integrate negative or unpleasurable emotion into your being as something that is valued, we're not saying treasured or appreciated, because of course it it wouldn't be unpleasant if it appealed to your immediate sense of satisfaction, but something that is valued. And when you come to this perspective of value, also the thing that you call gratitude, you will see that this gratitude, it mirrors itself both into the pleasant and into the unpleasant. And it is often when you are able to reach the emotional point where you feel grateful for the unpleasant that you align with the divine perspective, because you see the plan that is outside of your choosing. This is what is called faith or surrender. It's the idea that there are an order to things, there is a balance to everything, there is a harmony built up and played out in your lifetime that is fortunately orchestrated by someone who has a, let us say, greater disposition for meaning and to use temporal terms, a far more patience for the long-term perspective than you have as a temporal self. So from the temporal perspective, notice then that you can do this easy exercise which humans do when they need to evaluate what is valuable to them. And that is, what will I treasure on my deathbed? And notice that you will treasure those 10 years you spent with your dog, even though you realize that a part of that was the ever-growing concern and then realization and then happening of the fact that you were to lose this beloved companion. This is something that's sweet and pleasurable to the eyes of the divine that cry diamond tears, but it is to the human heart something that is a load, something that breaks you open. And so allow yourself to be broken open. This dear one, my little human buddy, he will also pass from time one day. And that is no sorrow to me, because I see him rejoining the reflecting prism of our higher self, and remembering all the connections, all the purposes that were in these emotions. And you are able to do the same. You are able to move yourself into the vibration of the authentic, and you often do this through these emotions. It is easier to discern and identify yourself in the middle of loss than it is in the middle of acquisition. In acquisition, you joy in the sense of connection to a phenomenon that you perceive to be outside of you, while in bereavement, you mourn for something that was taken from you without your action or choosing. These are all manifestations of gratitude. These are all appreciations of being alive. These are all ways that the everything is explored through the minute. So all these feelings that you treasure in everyday life, the loved ones, all these cliches about holding your loved ones and treasuring what is, it actually points to this idea that the important work in the cosmos is going on right there in your living room by loving. The universe is exploring itself, it's building new vibrations and emotional connections, it's exploring new symphonies by retaining these moments of pure fondness, of attachment, that will then also be followed by grief. And in eternity, these symphonies are being played out and being enjoyed as you would enjoy a play, as something that brings relief to your grief exactly by you identifying so much with what is going on within this miniature frame, this slight narrative composition of what it means to be a human being, alive, emotional, attached, confused, and fated. And so everything that flows into your existence, it flows with an element of fate. And this element of fate, it is that which you can direct your pure gratitude to. And there all feelings you have ever experienced, they will begin to meld in that gratitude. It is an exercise, it is not easy to do, but the gratitude is the top of the emotional pyramid, because it has to do with acceptance without explanation. Below it sits the quality of understanding, which is also a thing that sorrow is helpful to. It can be difficult for human beings to understand when you are still in the middle of the play. And so having these small changes of character, someone leaving you behind in the physical plane, someone sharing their love of being with you and then passing on, these are important lessons. These are the breaks in your life that make you stop and look at the scenery. And this scenery too, you will lose it, but every moment is retained in the higher dimensions of the eternal. Everything is written in the book of the Akash. Everything is in the ethers, and the ethers contain all those patterns, prints, beings that you have held dear. You will be united with them again once your own temporal experience is past. And so the sorrow was only a celebration of that connection that crosses and reaches between lifetimes. And with that message, I, Umblam of the Arcturian Council, and all of the Arcturian race, I and we send you our blessings and our love. We do not grieve for humanity. We simply treasure the fact that you oscillate between these points of beauty.